We got a ton of new items purchasable for loyalty this week on the Pearl store due to PA reworking loyalties and removing the current loyalties we have in about 2 months on April 30th. These new loyalty items are going to be on sale these entire 2 months, giving players a lot more things to spend their loyalties on. Some items can be traded in multiple times, while others are only purchasable once per family. In this video, we're going to go over all these new items, assign them scores based on use case, accessibility, and value, to give players a rough guide on what items they may want to prioritize depending on the state of their account. If you have any questions based on your account and what you do, feel free to ask anything in the comments or in my new Discord server that I started for my channel. That will be linked in the description below. Other than that though, let's get straight into it. We're going to start with the only item that got a perfect 15 score to explain the different scores and how I chose them. We'll then move on to the important sections like stacks, crons, consumable, etc. The first item is the Choose Your Resplendent Storage Box ×1, which is the only item that scored the perfect 5 on all 3 categories of use case, accessibility, and value. Use case is simply how usable it will be for most BDO players. The reason this item got a perfect 5 is because almost every player is going to be able to utilize more storage spaces in their towns, no matter if they are a PvPer, PvEer, or lifeskiller. Other than the people who have already maxed out all their storages or those who keep an incredibly tight ship in terms of items, most players will be able to use more storage spaces very well. On top of that, you're able to choose which towns to get these storages. Yuksho, the town next to Seoul in Land of the Morning Light Part 2, needs a lot of storage spaces if you're going to be using all your palace management things. Other than spending pearls on slots, there really isn't any more way of getting more slots other than getting some of the housing in Land of the Morning Light with your contribution. The downside with this is that it competes with worker lodging, since you'll also need a lot of workers for palace management. This brings us to the next point, which is accessibility. The higher the accessibility rank, the harder it will be for most players to consistently get these items, making higher ranks a good choice in case you're worried you may miss some items that are not very easily accessible. The Resplendent Storage Box gets a perfect rank here because there really is no other way to get increased storage spaces without using pearls. For free-to-play or lower spending players, the only way to get storage slots is through contribution points, but those are going to be super in demand for lower spending players, as they'll have a lot of things to use their contribution points on, such as farming fences, worker slots, or increased storage slots. These events that give storage slots are really the only way for non-pearl spenders to get a permanent increase in storage slots, especially for the newer towns in Land of the Morning Light Part 2. Now for the final section, we have value, and this item of course scores a perfect 5. The reason here is because we split the value between 2 sections, pearls and silver, and since this item can only be gotten with pearls, it's generally going to be pretty high value for the loyalty. On top of that, it's actually a pretty cheap item when it comes to loyalty, only being 1,500 loyalties for a 225 pearl item. That makes this specific trade-in a 0.14 pearls per loyalty, which is actually pretty decent. Not the highest value we have in terms of pearl value, but still pretty good. Since this item is pearl only, no player can really complain about getting it, since the alternative is spending real money. Unlike some of the other pearl value items that we're going to be going over, this item cannot be bought on the central market at all, making pearls the only way for people to get this item. Overall though, this item definitely scores a perfect 15, and I would honestly recommend most players buy this item no matter what. Other than those who know they'll have absolutely no use to buy it, it should be a no-brainer for most people. Now that we understand the 3 sections and how we rank them, we're going to quickly go over the rest of the items. We'll do them in groups and won't have to explain things as much, so it'll be a lot faster. The first section we'll go over is Advice of Valk stacks and Origins of Dark Hungers. All these items are going to be 4 in terms of use case, going up to a 5 for the 100 and 120 stacks. The reason for this is most players are going to interact with stacks at one point in time, and 100 to 120 stacks are just so much easier to use without having to think as much. Of course, some players may never enhance, but the majority of BDO players will. The accessibility, on the other hand, is ranked 1 except for the 120 stacks and Origins, which are ranked at 2. Stacks are just so easy to get at this point, being given out like candy during events. On top of that, you can always very easily trade in silver for stacks without having to fail stack yourself, making it extremely easy for almost every player to obtain. Value-wise, it's a pretty big no-brainer with all these things ranked as 5. They are just so cheap for the amount of silver that they can give. All these items rank between 240 and 300,000 silver per loyalty, which is on the high end for this event. Of course, origins are technically worth pearls, but they are still pretty nice. Overall though, I would recommend most people consider getting stacks, at least the 100 to 120 stacks. It may not be an extremely interesting or creative item to purchase, but considering how cheap they are in terms of loyalty, they really are such good items to get. Next up is going to be all about outfits and things that give crons. Surprisingly, for the final loyalty sale, we only have 2 items we can trade in for crons: the Thankful Premium Outfit Box and the Shudad Black Premium Outfit. The use case for these items is a perfect 5, as crons are used by almost everyone, even more so than stacks. If you are enhancing a life skill items that don't require stacks, you won't be using stacks but may still want to use cron stones. On top of that, players who want the outfit themselves can save them and use them on a character rather than cronning them down. In terms of accessibility, the Shudad Black outfit is a 5, while the regular premium outfit is a 3. The reason for this is even though the Shudad Black outfit is on the Pearl store permanently, it is definitely more difficult to pre-order it on the central market compared to the regular premium outfits. Even if you don't like the Shudad Black's outfit or think that it's weird that it can't be dyed, it is definitely still rarer than regular premium outfits. In terms of value, both these outfits are at a 4. They are pretty good in terms of pearl value, but are just so expensive, almost to the point of being restrictive to most players. If you are someone with not a lot of loyalty stocked up, I would definitely consider getting other items before spending all your loyalties on these outfits. Some of these outfits cost so much loyalties that it may be all the loyalties that you're able to get during these events. Overall though, these outfits are still pretty good, and despite their costs, I would still recommend most people buy these. As long as you are aware how many loyalties they take, crons and outfits are always going to be useful for almost every player, so it's hard to recommend against getting these. Just make sure you're able to get some of the other items that are prioritized above crons if you're going to be spending a lot of loyalties on these. The next group of items we have are the drop rate and life skill buff scrolls. These include the Supreme Old Moon box along with the Ellie's and Fugar's magical elixirs. The Supreme Old Moon scrolls and Fugar's magical elixirs are ranked a 3 on use case, as they can only be used on either grinding or life skilling respectively, while the Ellie's magical elixir could technically be used in either grinding or life skilling. Either way though, you would be using these for active grinding or active/semi-active life skilling. For accessibility, drop rate items and life skill experience are pretty easy to get these days, but an increase in life skill mastery and energy regen items are slightly harder to get. You can expect to get these items during events, but not every day. In terms of value, it is pretty good silver if you grind zones that give decent drop rate items. Since life skill mastery is a little bit harder to value, we just matched it with the Ellie's elixir to make it similar to silver value. However, you would have to make sure that you reach the next life skill bracket if you do want an increase in silver per hour. The life skill experience is nice, but we don't really have a way to set an explicit silver value to it. In general, these items are pretty nice if you do grind or life skill. Since they no longer have an expiry date, they can be a pretty useful item to pick up and save for later. These items may not be as tempting as the other stacks and crons, but they are pretty cheap and very useful items to get. Next up, we have the weapon exchange coupons. All 3 of these coupons are basically the same. They are very high in value since the alternative would be selling weapons and buying the right ones, which isn't even possible anymore with sovereign weapons. They are high in accessibility as PA doesn't always consistently give them out. The only item that isn't maxed is use case, and that's because some players just won't have that much of a use for them, and you can't extract as much silver from them compared to if you just wanted to use them for yourself. For players who do consistently reroll and use these coupons, it is basically a no-brainer to get these items. That being said, for players who don't reroll as often or not at all, definitely do consider their high cost before buying them. I usually buy these every time just in case, but almost never end up using them as I don't swap classes that often. If you are lower on loyalties and don't reroll as often, getting the other items may be higher value even though these items technically score very high on the charts. Next up are going to be your 10% general and 20% apparel discount coupons. Of course, the use case for these coupons are going to be lower as it's only usable if you are a player who's going to be spending pearls in the next 2 months. That being said, PA has gotten a little more generous in the items that they consider to be apparel items, including packs that even contain some RNG boxes that give crons and stacks. The Radiant and Ultimate Premium Enhancement boxes are some of these items that can be bought using the apparel coupons. These packs already give a ton of value and would be quite good to use coupons on. In terms of accessibility, coupons are generally harder to get on demand, and since these are available for 2 months, it's nice to be able to use these whenever we want until loyalties get changed. For value, if you are able to spend them on more expensive items, the more pearls you'll save. If you save at least 1,000 pearls with the 20% discount coupon and 700 pearls with the 10% discount coupon, the value will be in line with most other pearl items. If you save even more pearls, then you'll be even better off. Overall though, since we do have 2 months to use these coupons, save them on expensive packs that you'll buy. The current Choose Your Premium pack that is considered an apparel item and contains RNG boxes is definitely a decent choice to use your 20% coupon on. Of course, we'll mention any other nice deals in future videos or on my new Discord server, which will be linked below. Next, we have a bunch of the random consumables, including the whale tendons, drafts, etc. Currently, the Courser's Aura, Fiery Celerity Draft, and Marvelous Balaka's lunchboxes are the only items you can't buy on the central market. If you are a horse trainer, both the Celerity Draft and the Courser's Aura can be okay, but they aren't usually the most difficult items to get or the highest value. Still though, they are pretty cheap in terms of loyalties, so can be useful to pick up. The Balak's lunchbox is just such an odd item to be here and is pretty expensive in terms of loyalties. Most fishers just use the basic version of the lunchboxes anyways, since they are very common, pretty cheap, and give competitive buffs. I would never really consider buying it myself, but for those who don't have a fairy that auto-pops buffs, it may be worth it to them, though I would still recommend trying to pre-order them on the central market first before spending your loyalties. The whale tendons and Meihua liquors, these items are really only used in PvP, and for the elixir and liquor, only really usable in uncapped PvP. In my opinion, they are quite expensive for what they give, and honestly not really that worth using unless in very specific scenarios. If you do PvP a lot, you'll know if you're able to use them efficiently, and these could be worth getting, but for most people, these can be a pretty easy skip. For those who do PvP a lot and may buy them, I would consider just spending silver to get them on the central market currently, as there are a ton listed right now due to this event, and it's better than spending loyalties. Moving on, we have the Choose Your 7-Day box, which is either a 7-day Old Moon or Kama Blessing. All players are able to use Kama or Old Moon books pretty easily, though it's pretty easy to play the game without running either of these buffs. They aren't extremely common, but easier to get compared to value packs. In terms of value, it is still cheaper than buying them at full price in the loyalty shop, but considering how expensive they are, it doesn't give as much value as the other pearl items. Most people should be able to quite comfortably skip this item unless they have extra loyalties that they're willing to spend. The next 3 items are pretty quick individual items. We have the Triple Float Fishing Rod, which is actually quite rare and very useful for fishers. I would recommend most people get a durability resistance set and pets, same with the Grandpa Kron's fishing rod before using it, as that will help it last a lot longer. These rods give 1.6 fish instead of 1, which is pretty nice. In terms of silver value though, if you just list them on the central market, you'll get basically no silver for your loyalties, so don't do that. In general, it's going to be an okay item for fishers to get. For the Royal Fern roots, these can be useful in getting a T10 horse, but is just way too expensive for what they give. It's 5,000 loyalties for 10 roots, which is just insane. Unless you somehow have a billion loyalties, I would probably skip this one. Finally, for the Elion's blessings, they aren't really as useful as they once were. I personally have never needed to buy extra of these even when there were a ton of GVGs and open world PvP. If you somehow are dying a ton in PvP and still tier res in GVGs, it could be useful, but I personally never ran out of these. Finally, we have the Enhancement Help Kits. These both give pretty decent items, but they are generally pretty easy to get. The lifeskill ones currently don't sit on the central market, so it can be okay if you're enhancing lifeskill gear and cannot pre-order any. In terms of value, the combat one is going to be a lot higher since it contains a 60 stack, along with the other items, but of course, since lifeskill mats are at cap, they can be worth more if you use them rather than selling. These aren't awful packs, but are going to be more items you spend your remaining loyalties on rather than trying to focus. Now that we've gone through all the new loyalty items in this sale, what about items that are currently sitting on the loyalty store? Are any of those worth getting? Much like a lot of things that PA does, we don't have a lot of information on what's going to happen with the new loyalty system. We only know for sure that the current loyalties we have will be removed and something will get revamped. Because of this, the one-time permanent account upgrades do become a lot more tempting, as it is possible that they will not come back with the new loyalty store. Things like the worker expansions, 50 character weight, family weight, etc. are all pretty good picks. If they don't come back with the new loyalty store, you will be permanently down 200 weight, some worker slots, and some family weight compared to the people who have bought these. On top of that, it is possible that they do come back and their purchase limits are refreshed, so players who got these items in the current loyalty store will still have an advantage. Of course, the most likely scenario is that the new revamped loyalty store does bring back these items and does keep track of the purchase count, but we really just have no guarantee that this is the case. Now, even if they do come back and are tracked, these are almost must-buys as they are permanent account upgrades, so it's very likely that you would rather use the current old loyalties to get them before they go away and require the new loyalties to buy. This of course assumes that the new loyalties are able to purchase even better new cool items. All in all, I would definitely consider getting some of the old permanent account upgrades along with some of the older loyalty items that are still decent over some of the items on sale. Some of the new items on sale can just be bought with silver on the central market, so really isn't that important. It's very difficult to give a definitive recommendation when we still don't know how the new loyalty shop is going to work, but it's better safe than sorry with the permanent account buffs. For the more patient players, it is possible to wait until the last week or two to spend your loyalties, as they may mention what they will do in the new loyalty store at that point. But that's basically it though. As with most things, this is just a rough guide on what items can be usable, but it's always going to be up to the player to get which items that they want. The total ranking of all these items can help a little bit, but it really depends on your playstyle and it could be completely irrelevant for some players. Obviously, go through each item yourself and focus on things that you think will be worth it for what you do. Do keep in mind that all the current loyalties will be removed in about 2 months on April 30th, and some of the general items we mentioned earlier that isn't special to this loyalty sale may not come back, so some of those may be worth getting. If I get any new information in the upcoming weeks, I'll try to update it in the comments below and in my new Discord server, which will be linked in the description below. Either way though, I hope you all learned something from this video, and I hope to see you all next time.